I learned this from a wise coach. It just comes down to that abundance mindset versus the fixed mindset. And there's plenty of money that can be made, and everybody can win. It doesn't need to be just the founder or the CEO. Like, everybody can win. But that's a hard philosophy to buy into if you don't have that. If you have the scarcity mindset, you're born with that or you're raised around that, to kind of say, hey, I'm actually better with the team, and it's okay for everybody to win, and I'm going to make several people extremely wealthy if this works. And great. I mean, that paid dividends to me. It came all back to me just fine, and being generous like that. I've had other partners that did the same thing with me, where I was a minority shareholder. They gave me a chance. They gave me a little bit of the points, and they taught me and brought me along, and I provided some value, but maybe not as much as I needed to. But they were generous with me, and then I learned, and I'll definitely pay it back if I can.
Yeah, great. Both of you, I'm looking at both Ike and Brandon, are excellent when it comes to communicating with people, the vision. You know how to sell. I have often found that those who succeed better in their startups have the ability to connect, to establish rapport quickly, and then to be able to convince and commit people to take action. You two both do that. And I think that's an important part of why success happens especially when you're starting from scratch.
I don't know if it's Brandon. Maybe I don't know if you're gonna agree, but to me it's not selling. Like even with this business, like I am 100% committed to making something that's gonna change lives. It's gonna impact in a big way, and then leave a mark on Earth when I'm gone. So I came to this conclusion, so I'm living it. So when I tell the story that, when I this is what I'm working for, like this is what I'm building, this is what it's gonna do, to me it's not selling. It's like this is just me at the core, and then I choose to be busy doing this. I don't try to even convince anybody. Just tell my story, tell how I feel.
Got it.
Yeah. I think whenever you start a business, I think we're saying the same thing. Like, the most important thing you as a CEO or a founder can do is kind of decide what that vision is. What is that purpose? What are you trying to accomplish? Why? Is it for money? Is it to leave your mark on the world? Is it to create jobs, bless families? Whatever it is, like, you just need to get it out and get it on paper and get in front of your people. And if it's a worthy cause, if it's beautiful, if it's doing good, most people will buy into it. And we certainly had to go through that exercise as we were very young and didn't have money to maybe compete with some of the higher salaries. You have a purpose, you have a culture that you're creating, you have this camaraderie, or you set the pace as a leader and be the example where people want to be like you. And any of those things would work. To answer your question, Binoy, I think like the most, like, if I were to think of like the top 1, 2, 3 things that a founder needs in terms of a skill set, I agree that I think if you have the ability to sell, it's probably the most important thing that you could have. And if you have the ability to kind of communicate what your value add is, or what you bring to the market, and do it well and effectively and with charisma, and get people to engage, buy, or build that relationship, like that's huge, especially in the beginning. It just gives you traction, gives you a little bit of revenue. Revenue buys you time to fix operations and get all your ducks in a row. And then I think the second thing I would say is, as a leader, you have to be emotionally intelligent. You have to have a high EQ where you're able to read the room, that you're able to connect with people and understand where they're coming from, and how to position them so that they can win at their job, or provide the most amount of value to the organization. If you can read that to the people you're selling to, or You understand what their needs are, so you match your product mix or what you do, your service to that exact customer. So sales and EQ, those two things in my book are like probably the most important things to have if you want to be a founder or CEO.
Cool. I love the topics. You've interspersed some more topics in what you just said, and I'd love to get some stories with some of these responses. You also talked about how the startup is not for everyone because it taxes you in many ways, and you also mentioned how it taxes at home, at work, yes, but at home as well. Tell us what experiences you've had, what you had to do to overcome that as well, because everybody here wants to see hope and find hope, and some examples of how other people have done it.
Yeah. Well, I think my story, my story is probably pretty unique in some adversity that I had to face as I was growing a business. Without getting too deep into it, we basically, me and some friends started a medical equipment business right out of college. We were really good at sales. We blew it up. We scaled. I have a lot of respect to those partners that I had in those early days, because I was only a 5 or 10% owner at the time, and we mortgaged our houses and signed leases we shouldn't have done, and like borrowed. I think at one point we had $10 million to one vendor of debt, and we were bootstrapping. We were just flying by the seat of our pants. We were all in our 20s growing this business, and we knew sales, but we did not have the technology. We did not have the operational expertise, the inventory control. We didn't manage COGS correctly. We didn't look at our labor like a hawk, and we got into deep trouble. It was very challenging. Cash flow challenges. Every single meeting was about cash flow and the lack thereof, and we were yelling at each other around a conference table, and none of us had any really experience. We were just all learning together how to do it. And we weren't smart enough to bring in those consultants. And I don't even know if we could have recruited them in if we could. We were so, raw and scrappy and just not experienced. What made it worse was we had a situation where one day, I'm in Chicago. I'm running 6 or 7 offices. And in one of our branches, we had a bunch of FBI agents show up. And they took the computers, and they were scaring everybody, and it was terrifying. And it started a period of time, which is, I call it my darkest hour. And it wasn't just a day or a year. It lasted 7 years, actually. And it was terrifying. We didn't know what to expect. We had no experience with this. We didn't have any idea what to do. And so I had partners taken off. We had banks kicking us out of the banks and saying, "You got to get your money out of here. We want nothing to do with you." And that was a scenario. That was the time I got invited to move from a minority shareholder and take on more responsibility and eventually be the CEO. I cut my teeth as a founder under those circumstances. I was negotiating with the FBI, the Department of Justice. I was trying to, shoulder this so the employees didn't find out or competitors didn't find out. And we were, I watched some people that I love dearly get in trouble for some of the stuff that happened. And it was terrible, especially terrible on my family. When you go through that, it takes its toll on you personally and on your family, and I was no exception to that. So what ended up happening is several partners left. There's a few of us that remained, and we thought, we can, we weren't involved, or we had nothing to do with this. And there's hundreds of employees that are still here. We owe it to them to find a way to make this right and to move forward and not let this cause the company to have to be shut down. And so me and one other partner specifically, we decided to take that on, and we had to go through several painful rifts where we took people that had nothing to do with this, that didn't do anything wrong, had to lose their jobs over that. And when you go in those rooms, that's a hard day when you have to go in there and tell a person that you care about, who has a family, that, hey, because of things that you did not do, we have to let you go, and it's terrible. I still have nightmares from two specifically where we had to do larger ones. We sold off divisions, we dropped product lines, we changed banks and found somebody that would work with us. We begged our vendors to kind of be patient with us, and as this played out, and in the end, we were able to kind of keep the doors open and keep going. The other partner of mine who stayed was a type A alpha male, very similar to me, and we both had different ideas of how to run this company and how to make things right and how to take care of the employees. And in the end, we sought permission from the government to kind of split the company in half, and I took half and became the CEO of half of that company, and this gentleman took the other half. But we had to kind of work together with the government to get to a settlement. What we thought would be, a couple $1 million ended up being a lot more than that, and a ton in lawyers, and it set us back decades, or at least a decade. It was tough. So when I say in the beginning, like, hey, it's not for everybody, like that is not a normal, that usually doesn't knock on everybody's door. You probably will never have to go through that. So please don't be scared and not start a business because of that. But you have to be willing to go through some very hard things. And, this was particularly hard because, without getting too deep into the specifics of what happened, but when the government found out that it wasn't systemic across all of our offices nationwide, it was isolated to a small group, they kind of put us on the back burner. And they said, hey, we have some bigger cases to go after. We'll circle back with you guys, which was not ideal for us because we're unable to get contracts. We're unable to get banking credit. And we just had to be like, well, we have to have resolution so we can move forward. But for 5 years, they would not make a decision. And when the statute of limitations was up, we got a call that said, hey, we need you to sign this thing called a tolling agreement. And I'm like, what the hell's a tolling agreement? I have no idea what a tolling agreement is. So that would voluntarily extend the statute of limitations so that they can drill me. I was like, I'm going to voluntarily allow you to have more time to hurt me when I've already been so hurt through this whole process. So anyway, we got to we negotiated for our lives. We did everything we could to cooperate and try to do the right thing, and eventually got to a settlement that it was hard. It was hard, but we got to something we could live with, and then we started that long process of digging our way out of it. So, how does that impact a family? It destroys families. It's really hard. When you're home. At the same time, when I was doing this, I was in an LDS bishopric. I had 5 kids under 7 years old, and I'm running through this. And when you start to get depression and you lose hope, and you're hiding this from all the employees so that they don't get distracted, you need revenue, you need optimism. So you're trying to shoulder this. I remember going behind one of our stores. I'm in my car, and I drive it to the other side of the parking lot, and I'm weeping just because I'm so scared. That's just part of, if you want to do big things, you got to be prepared to take those kind of punches. It was hard on my wife. It was hard on our marriage. It totally fell apart in the middle of all that. I would be home, but I wasn't really home. I was in that deposition. I was in that cash meeting where we're like, how do we pay these bills? Who do we pay first? We can't pay everybody. How do I tell the sales team that we're going to delay commission? You're battling to get to cash flow, to profitability. No one knows it. No one sees it, but that's what's happening behind the scenes. we eventually made it. And I was lucky that I had this wonderful, beautiful wife that was willing to, rather than be a statistic and just divorce, put our kids through that, put our families through that. Like she was willing, and with me, and we were willing to like get professional help while we were going through that. And I think that's maybe something that I think founders ought to hear. Like, you know, if you decide to be a CEO and a founder, like you absolutely need help around you. It's such a heavy load sometimes, especially as you start to scale and you get to 100, 200, 300, 400 employees, and you got all the complexity that goes with that. You're going to need a coach. You're going to need a therapist. You're going to need someone that's helping you think straight and evolve through those different phases and do it in a way that's healthy. Taking care of your health through that whole process. Like these are huge important decisions that you got to get right. And I'm grateful that you know, you learn a lot through those types of situations. That's where you really grow. That's where you really see who you are and the type of man you're going to be: husband, father, neighbor, friend. That's where the rubber hits the pavement. So
Wow.
crazy story, I know.
No, it's like awesome you shared that with us. Thank you. I think there's a couple of things. One is, I think the founders are learners. We learn with the things that we act on every day as part of the startup. You obviously had a lot more difficult than most.
Yeah.
But it's like that saying, you know, the good sailors are not built in calm waters.
Correct.
That's all founders are all about. I think you just had the storm after storm after that never-ending storm.
Yeah.
Right. But it's also coming back to having partners, founders, having at work and at home. Is like founders, I think, have the syndrome that they need to solve the problems themselves sometimes, because you can share most of the stuff with your board members or investors or your employees. You're stuck, but you need an outlet. Maybe it's a gun, hobby, like you had, like but you need an outlet for sure.
Yeah.
What this has reminded me of, Brandon, thank you for sharing that story, that we all go through an equivalent to the level that we are capable of handling, and then maybe some more. And we all have stories, and I can also contribute our stories on this topic. Biggest thing that I've learned is, and it's something along the lines of, there's a very famous author, Tim Clark, who writes about psychological safety, and he says that learning agility is the ability to keep up with the speed of change. Listen to that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Learning agility is the ability to keep up with the speed of change. I love that definition, because that's what a founder does. At any point in time, something's going to break, something's going to come at you at 90 degrees and T-bone you, and you've got to be willing to change and adapt and quickly pivot for that new intrusion, for that new obstacle, for that new threat, whether it be to the family or for the business. It's always coming.
Yep.
It's always coming.
Yeah, and I also say, like, the opportunities as you're hitting the different levels of success and profitability, and, you know, different rounds of funding and such, like that change, it's you have to change over and over again.
Yep.
And yeah, if you don't, you lose opportunity, or you lose market share, or you miss the ball. But yeah, I would say that's one of the most important things that a founder needs to be not afraid of. Is just like, hey, we will discover new and better ways of doing things, or new opportunities, and if it fits with our core thesis and our strategy, like we have to do it as fast as we can and hit the market fast. And I remember several times in our business where we pivoted entire product lines because we found a niche, we found an opportunity, we find a demand or something that was not being met by anybody else, and it made all the difference. And I would say also, I think it really comes down to the leader too. Like the CEO has to continually evolve and get better and better. When I talk to like friends that own businesses that they're in charge, they're the CEO. Like I often will ask them, I'm like, are you, are you the CEO the business needs right now, or do you need someone better than you are, or do you want to like take a little bit longer road and you kind of work to become who that CEO that business needs at this point? Or you just got to know there's a trade-off. If you're not ready for that, the business is going to, be held back until you rise to the occasion. The alternative is just to hire someone that's better than you, someone that's got more time in the saddle, and that's okay too. I mean, it doesn't impact your equity unless you give it away. But I was in my situation. I didn't have the opportunity to do that. When you're under investigation or you have all these legal problems, and it's really hard to recruit a CEO that's better than you. So you just have to like get better really, really fast. And
but there's a lot of like checking the egos there, right? Like some of the things you said, like pivot the product, right? Like if for a founder to be successful, you have to commit to it. Committing means like you give everything you've got to this one, but it is so hard to come to a conclusion that, oh my God, the thing that I've been passionate about needs to pivot, change. I may have to abandon it.
Yeah.
Right? And the same thing with your role. Oh my God, like my drive is actually created this company. I came to this level of maturity. Are you saying I should give up and then bring somebody else? Like that is a lot of ego checking. Like, how do you do that?
Yeah, that's really hard. I mean, if you're a tech company and you've got investors and that's probably much harder to do something like that. You have to involve the board and all that. But I was part of a small ownership group. We were private equity. We owned it, and it was my company. So, yeah, you just have to get to the point where you're like, what does the business need? And am I that guy? Am I ready for that? Or is the return on our investment going to be so much greater if I step out of the way and get other people into those right seats? I'd like to think that 20 years later running businesses, like now I get it. Now it's easy to control the ego, and I just don't care anymore. But in 2010, 2012, when I was just getting into that, like, yeah, I probably had all kinds of ego problems. In fact, I had to hire a coach through that to knock down walls of PTSD and risk and get my head right after going through that. And I was, like I said, I was not ready to be the CEO, and I held the business back for so long. My ego probably got in the way. And it wasn't until I did some heavy internal work that we were able to change that. You guys might know this guy I hired. His name was Binoy.
Yeah, I've heard of him.
Yeah.
They say he's good.
Yeah, I don't know.
He's
Sounds
all right.
like a shifty name. Don't trust that. Hey, thank you, Brandon. Hey, but what I brought up is an important topic that you highlighted first. When you have to shoulder the burden and be the tip of the spear, and then you find out that you're going in the wrong direction, it takes a lot of guts to kind of self-correct. And yet every time I've worked with lots of companies that have succeeded, they're the ones that are taking action faster than anybody else. Whatever that action is, different product, different pricing, different sales VP in place, and whatever it is, even if it's getting a coach for themselves, they took action. And I've seen that the more frequent the corrective changes are, the more likely the business will succeed. No matter whether or not the CEO founder was a genius, was a product guru, was a sales guru, the constant changes tells me, oh, okay, they're ready to do that. Because I've also got stories of other founders who stayed the course. Most of them do not survive. If they don't already have cash flow telling them that things are wrong, they've got customers with high churn rates. talented employees leaving. That should be a big clue, a big slap in the face that it's something to do with them as the founder. And it's I think it's an important highlight for this discussion here for our listeners and viewers. It's an important one.
Yeah.
Change fast.
Yeah. And if you don't have some outlet or someone that can tell you the truth, sometimes you just don't, you can't see it. It's not even crossing your mind. And that's why like the best leaders, I think, are those that have a level of humility where they are seeking feedback, maybe not from all their direct reports, but from somebody saying, hey, what am I missing? Where's my ego getting in the way? Why am I, what am I not seeing here? And if you have the humility to ask that question and to really listen and not think you know it all, oftentimes that allows you to change quicker and pivot or rise to the occasion or fill that blind spot. And yeah, I've seen this over and over again across multiple businesses. Does that leader, is he self-aware or is she self-aware and seeking to improve? Some are and some aren't. There was a time I wasn't, and then there's a time I was very aware of where I was lacking and willing to address it, and put people around me that can, fill it in. And
yeah.
Thank you. I've got one topic we have to hit before